Welcome to Beyond Bitcoin's Bonus Hangout Edition. To help further educate the BitShares community of potential partnerships and opportunities that reaches well beyond our ecosystem. A common ground where ideas and plans come to unite, wielding the true potential, possibilities, and power of the blockchain technology that we call BitShares. If you feel engaged to participate in these crucial conversations, then please visit beyondbitcoin.org for future hangouts. Also, please remember to vote for our BitShares delegate, Fuzzy.BeyondBitcoin, to help keep our community informed and up to date. On behalf of the Beyond Bitcoin crew, we want to say thank you, and we appreciate your time and trust. Now let's listen in to our current guest.
Welcome everyone to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout, bonus edition. Today we are joined by one of my foundational teachers from the Liberty and Hard Money movements, BrotherjohnF. BrotherjohnF is in a distinct position within the Liberty movement because he was among the first in their ranks to recognize the value of cryptocurrencies for freeing markets. Admittedly, he has stepped back from the cryptocurrency movement for a time to focus on his first love, teaching people about the power of the people's money, otherwise known as silver. In that vein, it becomes apparent as you listen to our conversation why we cover both hard money and cryptocurrency as tools to fight against the current financial vampires. As always, he teaches me more about the precious metal I've grown to love, but this time I'm blessed with the rare opportunity to teach one of my favorite teachers and get him spun up in the world of crypto. Knowing he is open-minded and looking for solutions, I discussed the blockchain 2.0 technology that we call BitShares, the decentralized exchange, and its power to help us break the manipulation of precious metals markets. And naturally, I get the opportunity to discuss something else I believe he will love, the underlying protocol to BitShares, delegated proof of stake. Seeing that his focus is on money for the people, I'm sure he will love the only protocol that empowers individual stakeholders to dictate how a decentralized blockchain evolves. If you would like to learn more about BrotherjohnF's work, please consider visiting his BrotherjohnF YouTube channel, or check out the Silver for the People blog at www.brotherjohnf.com. Furthermore, if you would like to become part of his community to gain insights on the best deals in the semi-numismatic silver space, consider becoming a paying member. Grassroots efforts require grassroots funding. To really change the world, we need to come together to support those who support the best interests of us, the little people. So please feel free to thank us with a few tokens to pay for the internet so we can keep spreading the word and empowering you. I truly hope that you enjoy the hangout as much as I have. You introduce yourself to everybody a little bit, tell them what you've been doing. You are a pretty well-known person at least in the libertarian or the liberty movement in general, and in the gold and silver community especially.
Well, I started off in the silver community with my domain, BrotherjohnF.com, Silver for the People. And it's based on the idea that silver is their Achilles heel. They, the infamous they, being the banksters, that they're absolutely vulnerable to physical silver. It is, as I said on my webpage, it's the stake in the heart of the financial vampires. It's the bullet that slays the Wall Street werewolves. It is their key weakness. Now, I discovered Bitcoin in about 2011 and saw the possibility of that being another way of bringing down this monolithic bankster empire that basically runs and ruins the world. So I started doing videos. I did the bitcoinchannel.com domain and a Bitcoin channel on YouTube, and just started to explore the ideas of Bitcoin and the promise that it has. One of my first videos was Bitcoin and Borders, talking about how Bitcoin defeats capital controls and how Bitcoin is like the Gutenberg press to change the world. But then a lot of attacks came in. I had to deal with the attacks one by one. The reason why I formed the channel was because no one was defending Bitcoin. Subsequently, an enormous number of people have come into the space, and I kind of backed out of the space. I'm just kind of coming back in now.
And it's also, you have a community, right? Silver for the People is actually also a community, like a forum and everything. Is that correct?
Well, I have a member site, and people subscribe for $100 a year or $20 a month. And the reason why I did that is we were fairly successful initially as using public advertisements. I don't know if you're in the YouTube space or not with their revenues and things like that, but there was a time a number of years ago when one could make a living just making YouTube videos. That's kind of collapsed, and what I saw in the process of that collapsing was that my ability to say what I needed to say was severely restricted due to I'll call them bogus copyright strikes and attacks from shills. I also was threatened with lawsuits and things like that because my videos are live and I like to play other people's videos and criticize what they say and do things like that. And it was just getting to the point where that model, I couldn't support it. So I basically took it private. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So you have a paid subscription service, but you also talk about, one thing I've noticed is you like to guide people, maybe not advise them as a financial advisor, but you do seem like you know what you're talking about with respect to, the gold and silver and the value of it. And whenever the people who do listen to your YouTube videos are very interested in gold and silver as an alternative form of, maybe, I hate to call it alternative, as a main way of actually storing and transacting value. And you also cover, from what I've noticed, you don't really say, I would say to buy all this junk silver. I would say to buy, there's really good value numismatics of silver. So you actually can help people by saying this is a really, really low price right now. You're stacking silver, but you're also getting the ability to sell it for collector's value, which kind of almost seems in and of itself like a hedge against the manipulation of silver. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fairly good assessment. Basically, the page, I'm not a gold and silver guy per se. I'm more a silver guy. So the website and the YouTube channel were about the silver manipulation. Silver is, in my opinion, the most undervalued asset in the history of the world. And I'm talking about physical silver. I'm talking about the real thing, not some type of derivative or ETF or something like that. Now, I'm not saying there's no value in gold, but the silver is not controlled by the central banks. The central banks have hoards of gold. We don't know where it is. We don't know how much the Fed has, and we don't know how much has been taken into China. We have speculation. And we don't know how drained the Bank of England is, although the Queen's running around there trying to tell us there's a lot of gold. But there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes. We just don't know where that gold is going. That's the game the central banks play. Now, silver for the people, silver is the people's money. It means money in 60 different languages. It's always been the money of people and merchants, etc. And that's money that the people can control. And one of the reasons why is because there isn't enough of it for the bankers to even be involved with it. Even Warren Buffett had to cough up his 100 million ounces and get rid of it because they don't allow the billionaires to play in this pool. It's too small. So it's the people's pool. So I'm primarily interested in silver. Now, there has been a progression in my understanding, as well as many of the members, that the base is always going to be junk silver. That's where you start. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of the really good ones is because it was legal tender in the U.S., so it's well recognized by everybody.
Sure.
And so if we do, heaven forbid, and people are always telling me, well, why are you doing this? If we go into the collapse, and they talk about the collapse, nobody knows what form that's going to take. No one knows if it's going to be a hyperinflationary blowout, deflationary default, some combination of the two. We just don't know. So it's good to have that base of physical silver, which is the junk. If we do go to a barter situation, silver dimes and silver quarters, that's going to be great stuff. But at the same time, once you have that and you have maybe some silver eagles, then for me, it's more important to get involved with something that gives you staying power, because obviously this manipulation is lasting a long time. It's really, in my opinion, one of the biggest conspiracies in the history of the world, that the bankers have conspired against the price of silver. And it's going to last a while. And if you don't have the staying power, if you're somebody who comes in and bought at 30 or bought at 25 or wherever you bought, and you don't have the staying power, you're not going to be in the game when it ends. And what good does that do? So if you buy semi-numismatics, and a lot of the ones that our members are involved in are the Perth Lunar Series, if you get involved in those coins, which can rapidly increase in value, one that we picked up members site was, we had recommended the half-ounce Dragon in 2012 for a lot of reasons, because of up-and-coming economic future of China, that it was their lunar calendar based, and that there was a very low number. They were beautiful coins. And those coins are now $30 for a half-ounce coin when we were buying them at 12. So that's an example of how you can have staying power. You're not going to be tempted to sell something that's already tripled, unless, of course, you really need the money. And if you really need the money, barring some really horrible circumstance that can happen to all of us, then you shouldn't be needing to sell it. But it gives you staying power, if that makes sense.
The thing that comes to my mind is, wow, if I had invested in those, I would probably sell them and buy junk silver. 3 times the junk silver and just laugh. But I've been watching you do this for a long time, and I've seen the value of these numismatics go up based off of your recommendations.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because you have to understand the distinction between numismatics and semi-numismatics.
Sure.
So these coins that we buy, these are only about $1 more than the eagles or the maples. Okay, when we buy them. Mm-hmm. Now they accelerate much faster. You can go back and find a 2006 silver eagle. Well, what's the difference between a 2006 silver eagle and a 2012 silver eagle? One number. Okay, so these coins change, and they have an added value that costs you $1 more per coin if you get in at the right time. So they become numismatic, but initially they're not. They're just bullion.
Got you. One thing that you mentioned was that silver is one of the most manipulated. And this actually kind of ties into one of the reasons why I went, because I remember whenever I saw Bitcoin, I loved the idea of Bitcoin, and I still love the idea of Bitcoin and blockchain technology, which is what it brought us. I personally see it as like beta level technology. And I look at it from through a more of a technological lens, where protocols, there were protocols in the early days of the internet that no longer, while they might exist, but they're probably not very often used. Instead, there were stacks of protocols which essentially are bundled together, and that's what creates the use cases for the internet that you see today. So I look at blockchain technology from that kind of lens, and I'm getting to the manipulation thing. We talked early in the very beginning about proof of work and proof of stake. I don't say anything in terms of proof of work and proof of stake as though they are dead. I believe that they need to change. I believe that there are definitely going to be use cases in the future where they will be necessary. But I personally do not look at, let's say, Bitcoin as gold, or Litecoin as silver. Yes, they do have almost those colors, and they are the first ones that came into existence. So they have the largest network effect, which in essence really is what I think has created the large valuations for them. But whenever I started paying attention to Dan Larimer talking about these protocols from the protocol perspective, he really got into talking about DAX and how blockchain technology can be used for multiple things. But the problem was scalability. And another problem was that as he saw the technology reaching economies of scale, it became more and more centralized. And I always describe it to people as, as though hash power is guns, or is firepower. if you are the one who owns the manufacturing facility for weapons, you can put those weapons cheaply in the hands of people who you believe have a philosophy that you want to see grow and strengthen in the society. And you can overcharge others, right? And there are many ways that this can be done, but I kind of see ASIC manufacturers as a potential of moving in that direction. And what I really loved was what came out of Dan's, I liked Dan's philosophy initially, but I wasn't sure 100% that he was going to accomplish what he was saying. But he created something called delegated proof of stake. And what delegated proof of stake is that if you are an owner, let's say there are 1 million shares and you own, let's make it easy, you own 1,000 of those shares, then you have 1,000 votes, essentially, right? And you could vote for somebody called a delegate. And this was the early phases, the stages of it. And we won't get too deep into the Bitcoin 2.0 today, but I just want to give the basic idea. Delegated proof of stake said, wait a second, why not give the citizens in this ecosystem, the ones who bought into it, right? It would be like buying shares in America, in the USA. And with the shares that you buy in the USA, or maybe a company would be a better example, but with the shares that you buy, you get a vote for each share that you buy. So the more you want to buy in, the more voting power you have. So you're not going to want to vote for something that is not profitable for the society. You're going to want to vote for something that is profitable for society, for the society and the ecosystem. And this is how they essentially first started out with all this. And it's kind of, it's morphed and it's changed, and we don't need to get too much in depth, but there will be opportunities in the future if you're interested to continue maybe occasionally coming on and chatting about this stuff as we move forward. But what the first DAC that he wanted to come out with was BitShares X, which was the exchange DAC, now known as BitShares because it houses many of the earlier DACs that we originally thought that there would be many DACs like BitShares Play, BitShares Music, BitShares Vote, BitShares DNS. But there was what our community calls the quote-unquote merger. And to some, it's a great thing. To some, it's not. But what we have found, what they did was they brought on the dev teams from the BitShares Vote and the BitShares DNS ecosystems, because they figured that we could integrate those into BitShares itself. Now, getting to the manipulation side of it, BitShares itself, the exchange aspect of it, enables us to create essentially, I guess you could call them, I've heard them called derivatives of like BitGold and BitSilver, for instance. But the protocol itself doesn't allow high-frequency trading, and it doesn't allow naked shorting. And if I want to bet on, let's say, BitGold, there's going to be 200% collateral. There's going to be 100% for the person who shorts it. They're going to put up the value of BitGold. They're going to short it into existence by putting up the value of that short in the actual shares of the exchange, based on the shares of the exchange, which is BitShares, right? And the person who's going to buy the BitGold is going to buy let's say, $1,000 worth of BitGold by paying in BitShares, $1,000 worth of the shares in the exchange. So what are some of the big things that enables this manipulation to occur? Well, two of the big ones are high-frequency trading and naked shorting, right? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, let's take it back to a more basic level. Let's use the stock market as an example. Where we are right now with stocks is we have this organization called the DTCC, and basically they're the depository of all the shares that are out there. Probably a lot that are phantom. We don't really know at this point. We're not really going to know until the system collapses.
Sure.
But to use stocks as an example, if I go down to my brokerage and I want to short a stock, for example, one that I would love to short and have done many videos on them is the AGQ triple silver and the ZSL double silver short. And if you look at these ETFs, they eventually go to zero, whether they're long or short, because they're rigged, essentially. But I can't get the shares to borrow. They're not going to loan them to me because they know that. They know what I know. And you can't borrow those shares because it's like putting money in your pocket. It's like Jimmy Rogers said, it's like taking a wheelbarrow and walking over the corner and putting the money in. That's how easy it is to make money. So
Yeah.
they're not going to let you do that. But basically, when you go and buy shares from your brokerage, you sign an agreement that allows those shares to be held in street name, which means that the brokerage is holding those shares for you and you aren't holding them directly. Now, you could always request the shares actually physically to be mailed out to you. And that gets into all the counterfeit shares. You're still not going to escape
Sure.
the problem. But the point is that being held in street name gives the ability to short. And that gives you the ability to borrow shares that somebody else has and sell them on the market and expecting the price to go down. And once the price goes down, you can buy those shares back and pocket your money. As Jesse Livermore is famous for saying, he who sells what isn't his'n must buy it back or go to prison. So
Sure.
that's the essence of shorting. Now, cryptocurrencies, initially, just the bare bones things like Bitcoin and Litecoin, for example, that ability doesn't exist. You can't create derivatives based on them unless you set up some similar structure like the DTCC, which is going to collapse and leave a lot of people with nothing. So this is a fundamental problem of trust. And I have not yet seen the answer to it. Now, I have not explored BitShares and these things because my attitude, I'm just getting back into the game, but my attitude has been, let's be hands off. An analogy for me would be the automobile back in the 20s. If you remember, before the stock market crash of 1929 and the subsequent depression, there were actually hundreds of car companies, and 99% of them went bankrupt. A few survived. And that's kind of the way I look at cryptocurrencies. For me, Bitcoin is just a cryptocurrency, and a lot of people have pointed out flaws. For me, my attitude is let's leave it alone and see what it does. Now, someone might come up with another coin. We're starting to see these coins. One coin that I'm investing in right now that I really like is Florin coin. And that's because it has the Alexandria project, which gets us back to decentralized peer-to-peer file sharing and a way to actually circumvent the control that the Hollywood, etc. industry has to shut down the information where people can. Because really all the sites like Kick-Ass Torrents or the Pirate Bay, they're really just collections of places where people have the files, the magnet links. They don't have any content anyway, but they've managed to shut them down. Now, Florin Coin, on the other hand, it's going to be in the blockchain. They won't be able to shut it down. So there's an example of where someone had a new idea and just made a new coin. That's the kind of model I like because I don't like changing Bitcoin. I don't like changing Litecoin. If you want to make a change, make something else. That's kind of the way I feel on that one.
You know, it's very interesting. And I want to just say for anybody who's going to be listening to this after the fact, what we do in these Beyond Bitcoin Hangouts is there's no necessarily right or wrong. It's more of an open discussion. And the people who are here are more than welcome to speak up, as always, or ask your question or state your comment in the chat box, and I'll bring it up. But we do, we're all going to have our own opinions, and I feel like it's important because the reason why I started this out, the way that it's structured, is because I watch talking heads on television who they have obvious people who are obviously paying for them to say the things that they're saying. And I remember Greg Hunter, when he worked for CNN, saying when he worked for CNN, that he would look at his comrades and they would receive the topics of the day and their statements, that what they were going to talk about and what exactly they were going to say every day in the mail from the people above them. They didn't do any real reporting. They simply were paid to get on television every day and get in front of a camera every day and say exactly what their bosses told them to say, right? And that means over time, what I've seen is that people look for thought leaders, right? And whenever you see somebody on television and the set is immaculate, they're wearing nice, crisp clothes, they have makeup on, they're put in this you're put in this situation where quite literally people believe that everything that these people say as though it is fact, as though these people are better or smarter than us. And I really disliked seeing what's happening because of it, right? There are many times when I can tell somebody a fact, a true fact, and they'll turn around and dispute it based on something they heard on the news the other day. And I want to tell them, my Lord, please look outside of that little bubble that you call the television. It's called programming for a reason. It quite literally does exactly that. It programs you to think the way that these people want you to think. It's manipulative. And this is intentionally open for that reason, because I might not be right on everything. You might not be right on everything. But together we can all come to some sort of agreement over time and better ourselves, because we can all learn from each other. And I think that's the only way that we really move past this paradigm, is realizing our own potential. And sometimes the best way to realize our own potential is somebody else pointing that potential out. So, Joey D's saying here, what do you mean by not changing? I can't think of anything that is unchangeable other than light speed, constant in Einstein's theories.
Okay. What I'm referring to is, and before I say this, let me clarify. As far as the Bitcoin channel goes, I chose very early on. This was in June of 2011. Actually, it was on my birthday in 2011. I decided to not pursue the path of being directly involved in Bitcoin, because a lot of stuff was shaking out at the time, including FinCEN, and a lot of stuff was going on. We ultimately know what happened to people like Dread Pirate Roberts and things like that. So what I decided was to report on it. And for me, Bitcoin represented something similar to the Gutenberg press. It fundamentally changed the world, arguably even was the cause of the Renaissance, etc. So for me, Bitcoin, I explored it very thoroughly, and I saw some flaws, but I didn't see an Achilles heel in there. And I decided that it was going to survive on its own. It wasn't going to be something for me to get rich on, although heaven forbid, I could have, at the time that I saw it, $2, I could have stocked away a lot of wallets.
Sure.
Had a lot of wallets stolen. That doesn't really matter to me, honestly. But when I'm talking about changing things, is there were a lot of appeals because of a lot of problems. And there are some problems. There's the size of the blockchain. There's the ASIC issue. There's a lot of issues. But a lot of people wanted to address those issues by going to the developers and changing Bitcoin to fix the issues they saw. And my idea is, no, just leave it alone. If there's a problem with the blockchain getting too big, and with, I don't remember, is it Moore's law? Whatever the law is about processing power getting greater as we go. And there's something similar with storage, we'll see. Is it going to work out? Maybe it won't. As I said from the beginning, maybe Bitcoin will fail and another coin will take its place. But the idea of decentralized cryptocurrencies, that's never going away. And so I still don't know which is going to be the coin, but I caution people from trying to change what's out there, because you can just make it new. A lot of these alts, they're just a Bitcoin wallet with some names changed and stuff. I mean, you look at the wallets, one of them's Litecoin, one of them's Bitcoin, and they changed a few things. Other ones are very inventive and come up with all kinds of new stuff, especially the proof of work and proof of stake coins. Now, will there be one? I also like Zitecoin. I'm involved in Zitecoin. There's a number of coins I'm picking up. Just maybe there'll be one that is successful. Florin Coin's another one I like. But the point is that rather than trying to fix and change that which already exists and seems to fill its niche, like I consider Bitcoin to be kind of the gold and Litecoin to be the silver, let's move forward by working on new things. That's kind of my feeling on that.
We're in a place where, with our community, I can honestly say that I don't come from, I'm a fanboy of what Dan Larimer and his team is doing. I will say that. So I do have a bias. But the reason why I'm biased is because I can only think of a small handful of projects that are that really are reaching to the level of innovation that these blockchains are reaching. 100%. Blockchain technology is not going to go away anytime soon. I'll say this though, my biggest concern with blockchain technology, and I don't know if you share this concern or anybody else here, please feel free to speak up. But the one concern that I really truly have, the biggest concern anyway, is you hear all the time these leaders talking about ensuring, that we have all these KYC, right? This money laundering and all these things that they're pushing these laws that make it so everything needs to be trackable, right? They should be able to track every dang thing we do. And they already basically do by, using the infrastructure that is currently in place. They surveil and capture all of our data. But if the one thing that I see as like a keystone to making it the ultimate surveillance system is making it so it is completely trackable, a currency that is completely trackable and linkable to the accounts and the metadata that they're currently storing. Because once you have those interactions, now you can really start to see a lot of things that you couldn't even see just with the metadata. So do you ever have any concerns or sit there and think about that type of stuff with respect to digital currencies?
Two sort of different issues. For me, a decentralized cryptocurrency is a different issue than the trackability of it. I know that there are currencies that, the idea is being explored to have, I think maybe Blackcoin is one, but to, build that into the system. I don't really buy into all the NSA nonsense and Snowden and all this stuff. For me, it's really, they just want to tax everything. They just want to control everything. And,
Sure.
They have, when Bitcoin first came out, it was, all of the FUD came flying out. If you remember, I was doing videos on that back in 2011. Mm-hmm. The FUD was kid porn and drugs and all that stuff. And we know that Bitcoin, you could have a briefcase, and what do you put in your briefcase? Well, you could have $1 million in 20s. You could have drugs. You could have pornography. Does that have anything to do with the briefcase? Not
Nope.
Really. We're going to outlaw briefcases, so that's really kind of dumb when you think about it. But now you look at what's happening with the banks, and we're looking at the terminal phase of the Western banking system where they've pushed interest rates negative, and they're talking about outlawing cash. And the reason why they're doing it is because if I go and put 10 grand in the bank and the bank charges me a fee to keep my 10 grand there, well, why don't I just put it in my mattress? And that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. So for me, the NSA, you have to remember this came from the NSA. If you go to the bitcoinchannel.com, there's a quote of the day from J. Orland Grabb, who saw this back in the 90s. And it was an NSA agent who told him about it, that cryptocurrencies and encryption will be the future of privacy. And so I don't know. I mean, it's a big game, and I'm not really involved, and I'm kind of like a spectator, but
sure.
I think that anonymity is probably going to be part of it. I don't know how the anonymity will occur, whether it will be attached to a particular cryptocurrency built into it, or whether it's an outside system. People talk about the Tor network, and I don't even touch stuff like that. But I mean, I think the military invented that as well. So it's a very confusing rabbit hole when you go down that one.
Well, certainly. Well, then let's move a little bit into the area of, do you think that there is value, or where do you see, what do you think about decentralized exchanges that are autonomous third parties that carry very little counterparty risk, if any counterparty risk at all, as being the basis of future valuation of assets?
Well, when you mean exchange, you're talking about things like Cryptsy and ones like that?
No, what you have with Cryptsy, okay, and this is, you said that you didn't read up on, you don't know a whole lot about BitShares, but BitShares is quite literally the first thing that I know of that's doing this. And they're likely, and I hope there are future other ones in the future, even though I'm invested in BitShares. I hope there are other ones in the future, because I would hope to God that I'm not part of a monopoly and super wealthy off of something like BitShares, and it's the only thing that ever exists like it. But it actually, Cryptsy is a centralized exchange, right? It's very similar if you look at it to like an ISP for the internet. It is a place where I can send my funds to Cryptsy. Now, if a government entity comes to the owner and the workers at Cryptsy and says, you guys need to lock these accounts because they are not verified. They have not verified their identity. They have not done any of this stuff. Then Cryptsy can essentially lock your account and you can't access your funds, right? And that is a counterparty risk, because you are trusting another person that these current power players can leverage that entity.
Let me just interrupt you real quick there. So a very good point, and I just wanted to point out to the listeners the way that I use Cryptsy, and that's the main one that I use right now, is that I don't leave anything on the exchange. I trade back to wallets. So if I'm going to accumulate an alternative cryptocurrency, then I'm going to buy it up and use my leverage. Probably not going to sell into the market that much. And then when I accumulate maybe 2.5 million of a particular coin, or that's going to get locked away in a wallet, maybe even cold storage. So that kind of helps with that issue. But I definitely agree with you. I haven't explored decentralized exchanges, and I've never seen one that works, but I'm open to the idea. That's a great idea.
Keep sticking around us, and I assure you, you will learn plenty about decentralized exchanges. And I'm sure you will teach people a lot about, because you're a Series 7 trader yourself, correct?
Many years ago, I was a stockbroker and a commodities futures trader as well.
The reason I bring it up is because that is exactly what BitShares was meant to do. It is a place, because the problem we're finding is that everyday users do not want to be bothered. I'll tell you right now, I don't want to be bothered with having to trade and then send it back to wallets, and then have to, especially if the block times are such that it takes me 10, 15 minutes to get there, or sometimes upwards of, there have been times that Bitcoin transactions for me have taken upwards of 6 hours. And it might not be just because of the blockchain itself. It might be because of middlemen. It could be for any number of reasons. But if I'm going to send it to something like a Cryptsy and it takes me an hour or 10 minutes to an hour for it to get there, that could be problematic, especially for somebody who's a day trader, right? But the thing that's really valuable to what we're doing is most users will not take those steps themselves because it's just so time consuming. It takes a lot of effort. So if every user isn't doing that, well, that really significantly affects the strength of the network itself, the security of the network itself, right? Because if everybody is not doing those basic things and they get their accounts locked or any number of things, confidence might be lost in that coin's chain, right? It might lose the network effect and it falls in value significantly. And the person like you who's holding it safely at home is sitting there saying, well, why did I put all this effort into it? So what BitShares itself actually does is it enables us to completely dissociate from that third party counterparty risk, because all the trades are actually being done off of the blockchain. And whereas something like Bitcoin and all these proof of work and even a lot of the proof of stake algorithms make it so it's very difficult to have quick transaction times and, like you said, the transaction volumes, BitShares is actually going to be able to process way above Visa level transaction volumes. And we're talking confirmation times of 1-2 seconds. Somebody who's in here, you guys are more than welcome to let us know if I'm wrong on this, but it's really amazing what Dan and them have done. Now this isn't the only cryptocurrency out there, and I'm sure there are going to be other ones that are doing amazing things too. But that's kind of the value proposition, and a lot of people don't know about BitShares with respect to that. But I've always thought to myself, if we have something like that, and it becomes the new place where everybody wants to go and exchange and actually be part of the market. Well, if on the protocol level, it also protects from naked shorting and high frequency trading, well, then we're going back more into the days where trading was actually between people, kind of like on the what do they call it, in where they're where everybody's actually like shouting on the floor of the net
open outcry.
Open outcry. Yeah. So it's almost back to those days where you can actually say, well, if there's no naked shorting and no high frequency trading, I'm sure there will be other ways of manipulating it. But that's a huge thing, right? That's those are two of the biggest problems that we have today. Would you be willing to agree with that?
Yeah, the naked shorting for me is the big one. But let me try to draw this out from you, because I'm a little bit behind on some of this stuff. So, for me, let me give you as an example. So if you go to Cryptsy and hit your balances and list, you can see the good 160 coins that you've got there. You got some balance in. Let's take one that I've been accumulating, Zitecoin. I don't remember how many there are, maybe 15 billion or something. But, I buy a few 100 million of the coin, and I just notice that I'm going to pull them down to the wallet. I noticed that they got that little wrench icon there. The wallet's locked, right? Mm-hmm. So I can't get my coins off the exchange. Now, Big Vern or whoever the guy is that runs that thing, as far as I know, these guys seem to be above board. But, I don't even want to regale you of the stories of how many Bitcoins I've lost on different exchanges. Sure. Just leave them on there and see it. In fact, my donation address is still my old Vercurex address, which, basically trading volume has gone down to nothing over there. But the issues with these is that locked wallet, right? Yeah. So, I want to get my coins off, but the wallet's locked. And so for me, the issue of trust is going to be these guys that run this exchange have this wallet and 160 other wallets. They probably have dozens of wallets for each coin. And so this wallet's stored there. They have the wallet stored there. So what I can't get past, maybe you can explain to me, is in a decentralized exchange, where's the wallet stored and who has control of it?
Well, you have the wallet, but it interfaces with the blockchain directly, as opposed to, let's say, a server that is administered by Big Vern's workers, right? Joey is very, very technical. He might be able to go really deeply into it if you need it.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, we're talking about the exchanges, distributed exchanges. There are a couple of concepts that are floating around, and one of the issues is, for example, if you go with Ethereum, the smart contract way, then the blockchain with a program on top of it would hold all the wallets and keys, for example. That's one of the concepts. But the concept that BitShares is using is you don't hold the actual tokens of all these blockchains, you hold the value of these tokens on the blockchain. So you can exchange these tokens everywhere you want. So you're not limited to the exchange for, the only thing you're doing is you're trading the value of them. And that's how the distributed concept works on the BitShares distributed exchange.
So it's like a derivative, only it's not a derivative in the sense that you look at, it's actually backed by something of value, right? It's backed by the actual shares in the exchange. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to trade the value of Litecoin, you can trade it directly on the chain. Now, things are moving forward, and there are people who I know. Are you familiar with something called Shapeshift?
No, I'm not.
Shapeshift is basically a means. It's not decentralized, though. It is a centralized way of converting any coin into any other coin. You just put in the amount of coins you have, the address that you want it to send it to for, like, say, Bitcoin. You can convert it directly into that Bitcoin. But I actually know somebody named Kevlar he started out in the Feathercoin ecosystem, to my knowledge, who's creating something called Switch, which is a decentralized version of that, where all those transactions are going to occur on the blockchain themselves, and they will be logged there on the blockchain. Because the problem with Big Vern and them, they use central databases, right, that store all this information and all that's what these digital currencies are, right? Information.
One thing, the biggest problem with all these changes is they're black boxes, and you don't know what's happening, or if they're working on fractional reserve, or if they're gaming the market. And what the current generation exchanges do is they actually prove or show that you can only trade in what they have. I don't know how the Ripple solution works, by the way. I think they I haven't keeping track of them. But last time I checked, they didn't do actual fact checking. So it was IOUs, and that's the thing they're trying to solve.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. That actually is an issue. Let me just give you an example. If you go to, I don't know if you guys, the site worldcoinindex.com, it's probably one of the best sites out there to see trending alts coins. And one of the coins that I was recently trading was Lotto coin, just for fun, because it was one I accumulated way back in the day.
Yeah, I remember.
And we had some good doubles and triples in that coin. I doubled my money a couple times in the last few weeks and got back out. I think it's ready for another rise. But one thing I noticed with that coin was that the wallet was locked for a significant amount of time. Of course, when I'm trading a coin, I want to know exactly how many coins are on the exchange. I want to know how many they say are on the exchange. That gets to the point he just made. How many are on the exchange and how many they say are on the exchange might be two different things.
This is counterparty risk.
Right. And one of the things I noticed in the trading of the coin was that as I began to accumulate the coin, and of course, as my system is, once I'm up at a significant percentage of the float of that particular coin, I'm going to pull them off the exchange. And one thing I noticed was that with Lotto coin, when I withdraw 10 million, they'd only send me about 500,000. And I contacted them and said, "What's going on?" And they're like, "Well, there's something wrong with the wallet." And I said, "Okay, well, get to work on it. But So far, to my satisfaction, I'm not really convinced what was going on. Now, if you think about it, if there's some kind of fractional reserve system operating, they're not going to be able to give me the coins, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll be able to buy them, but I won't be able to withdraw them. And of course, that's actually what presaged an enormous run-up in that coin. Of course, I was buying it all the way up too, thinking, oh, well, maybe they don't really have the coins. And if that's the case, like I said, Jesse Livermore, he who sells what isn't his and must buy it back or go to prison. Now, these guys are registered with FinCEN. So, people say, well, I don't trust them, stuff like that. Well, there's some good things and things like, there's some good things in regulation like that because, these guys are subject to a lot of laws now. So, if they don't make good, they could be in big trouble. So that's just an interesting aside on that issue that I'm seeing when I'm starting to trade. And that's not just Cryptsy, but other exchanges, Bittrex and the other ones that are active right now. But that's a very, very important issue, is how can we establish whether the book is real or whether we're just trading. In the old days, it was called a bucket shop, right? Mm-hmm. That's how Jesse Livermore became what he is. He was a quote boy in the bucket shops. Now, the bucket shops, for the most part, never really traded on the real exchange. They were, in essence, trading fabricated shares. But due to the fact that they had shoestring margins, they could always, most people's tickets end up worthless. So they were never really tested. Although Livermore had the ability to beat the bucket shops, and in most cases, they shut down trading on him. And, you'll have to read Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, but it's the same concept. How do you know whether you're trading with a bucket shop?
That's a really good thing to bring up too. And you actually have me wanting to read this book. The one question that I have, and it's a very good point you bring up, like FinCEN and all these things. Do you foresee these being a potential issue though? This is one of those places where, a lot of the people in this area are complete anarchists. Others believe, that there needs to be some level of regulation. And I have a very difficult place. I have a difficult problem with this personally, and I don't know where I stand. I'm curious where all of you guys stand, not just Brother John F., but I'm obviously interested where you stand too, with respect to this, because one of the problems that I see and one of the concerns I have, and I'm just going to say it, it might not be popular to say it, but there's something called the mark of the beast that I've been told about in the past, and I've questioned these things a lot, but then the more and more I see things like how in the Bilderberg group they had the Google executive, her name, I forget her name off the top of my head at this juncture, but she was talking about consumable microchips that essentially they use your stomach acids to complete the circuit, power themselves, and now you get this quote unquote superpower to authenticate just by having this device in you. And she's talking about wearable tattoos, and I see these trends moving toward this system where they don't, the people out in London now saying every currency needs to be digital. All these trends, you see them pointing to one thing. At least I do. And that's a concern for me. And I think that FinCEN and all these different government institutions, the part that concerns me about these, I do see what you're saying, that they're necessary to a degree. But is there a better way? Right? Because what do we see? These government institutions always get taken over by mobsters, essentially, who just want to be seen by the public as legitimate. And then they use that power to their own ends. And they really, ultimately, their end goals really actually have nothing to do with empowering and helping humanity. It's all about finding a way of making humanity subservient to them and leeching off of the value of them. So I'll just shut up and I'll let you guys talk a little bit.
Best example was seeing Blythe Masters getting into the Bitcoin consultancy business. That scares the hell out of me. Good point.
Well, I don't know if you want to go into the Bible prophecy thing. That's a whole another area. But I'm very different in this space. I've been very clear that I'm I don't really know what term you would use, maybe Christian anarcho-capitalist, perhaps. But like I said, with FinCEN and the rest of them, for me, it's not really big conspiracy and terrorists and all that stuff. It's just the IRS wants their tax money. It's the bottom line. And so, with silver, for example, if you buy a bunch of physical silver and sell it at a profit, you're going to have to pay the IRS. That's the bottom line. And I always advise people to pay their taxes. Now, this comes from a Christian perspective, that this isn't our home. We're going somewhere else. So my perspective on it is very different than most. I don't fall in with the overthrow the government folks and all that stuff. If you go on the far end of, the anarcho-capitalist group, you've got Jeff Berwick types who are saying that there's no need for any government, and then you've got, all along the spectrum. So
sure.
The place I fall in the spectrum is government is a necessary evil. We're taught from the Bible why we have government. It's to punish evildoers. Now, the big question is what happens when the government becomes the evildoer? Well, I can't offer you a lot of answers to that, but I think the answers are contained in the book of Revelation, that ultimately the governor, the ultimate governor, he's going to punish them. So it's not our job, really. That's not where we're at right now. Our job is to just try to help others and create value. So I don't see this big evil monster. A necessary evil is more the way I view it.
I don't know where I stand. The place where I stand, I would imagine, would be kind of in the same area. I think that there need to be systems that are in place to protect people. The problem comes down to, for me, the more that I look at things, are the rules that are being established as a representative consensus of the community who is to be protected by them? And if so, who is enforcing it? And if they are enforcing it, are they enforcing it as it is intended? And
I think what you're looking for is transparency and accountability.
Bingo.
Overall, capitalism is a fucked up system because incentives always lead to destruction. And that's one of the problems with capitalism. It doesn't scale all that well. If you get my drift. For example, all these gun companies, they're interested in war, and war is not something, even though it's a free market and capitalism, like you wanted, but they're interested in creating more and more wars, and they're very successful at it.
Yeah, I would have a little bit of different take. I don't see capitalism and free markets as the same thing, but I'm all for free markets. It depends on what people term as capitalism. I think a lot of the criticisms of capitalism actually have to do with the co-optation of free markets by various powers. I think it was, I don't remember his name. It wasn't J.P. Morgan, but it was, I don't remember who it was. But anyway, he said competition is a sin. So the big oligarchs have never really liked competition. Now, you can say whether were they socialists, were they capitalists, who knows, whatever moniker we can give them. But right now we're looking at a situation where these people control a vast majority of the wealth. And the big problem going forward that I see is, to make an analogy with Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrencies, you have essentially a public ledger. And you talked about transparency. There is virtually no transparency on the other side. And so what we have is this gigantic ledger right now that's held in private hands. And I personally believe that we're on the verge of the collapse of that system. And unfortunately, a very large percentage of the population who believes they have a share in that ledger, either the ledger is just going to be lost, or the system will shut down and be restarted and a new ledger be put in its place. But how will all these people know what their share is in the system? And so I agree completely about there being transparency, and there really isn't any transparency. So right now we have a whole lot of people who think they are owed something and they're going to be paid something, but I think they're going to find out that something has already been stolen, or that something is actually an obligation that means others have to support them. So I tend to try to encourage people to opt out of the system that I believe is beginning to collapse and will ultimately end. And of course, Bitcoin being a public ledger, that's, a much better alternative.
I don't see how people think that capitalism without rules, for example, or without any regulation at all, would prevent monopolies from forming. So it's a self-destructive system if you leave it without any form of control. There's no company, or not these big ones, who are interested in cutting themselves up when they get too big.
Like, it gets back to the point that we're, is there a fundamental flaw in the system of the concept, when we talk about Bitcoin, the concept, we can talk about free markets, the concept, and your question as to whether or not they become corrupted. There's no debate about the fact they're now corrupt.
Sure.
It's government's job. And I'm saying, there still are some ones, believe it or not, I think they're mostly captured, of course. There still are some enforcements, but of course their job is to enforce the rules. Obviously, someone stealing your bank account, well, you should be able to call the police, but we're seeing quite rapidly now that they're changing the laws that the police enforce to say that they can take your bank account. So definitely we're getting to the point where the corruption is so bad that, they plan on stealing everything. There's no question about that. They intend to steal everything. And is that the fault of markets, or is that the fault of human nature, or is that just the fault of where we are in history? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a very interesting debate.
William here makes a good point. He says it depends on how powerful the consumer is. And that's actually, to me, I find myself wrapping my head around that a lot, because it really, to me, comes down to the institutions of power. If I become a congressman, for instance, I almost feel as though I should be giving up my privacy during that period of time to the public, because I am now a public servant. And once I'm done with my term of service, while I'm in, it should be, quite literally, it should be a very difficult job. I should be under the highest level of scrutiny. And then it should be so difficult that I don't want to hold it for 30 or 40 years of my life. I should be there under intense public scrutiny while I am serving the public. There should be complete transparency in pretty much everything I do. And then once I'm done, I'm basically taking care of the rest of my life. And I get all those rights. I get all that privacy back. I get all the things that an everyday citizen gets. But it's almost, to me, like we're in this place where the system is turned upside down from how I believe the ideal is, where now they have all of this privacy. We can barely see what's going on with the backroom deals and all this stuff. And at the same time, big data is mining everything about us. And I know you are a Marine. You're no longer in the military, but you were in the military. And
are you talking to me?
Yeah, Brother John.
No, I've never been in the military.
For some reason, I thought that you said that you were a Marine at some point in time. I might be no, that's Chris Dwayne. My apologies. When I joined the military, it gave me a real change of perspective with respect to some things, and I see how, all this stuff can be used against people. War doesn't just start with a gun. It can also be economic. It can be storing all this different information on you and then blackmailing you. Blackmailing your representatives to force certain legislation to be passed that is out of your best interest. And
that really gets to
stuff. Go ahead.
And you're really getting to the essence of politics right now. And, the only real qualification now to become a politician anywhere in the world is blackmailability, what they have on you. Now, we don't want to go down the rabbit hole of what those people are doing. And, the Bible says it's a shame to even speak of them publicly, of what they do. And frankly, I don't want to know or have any involvement. My father told me from very young, he was in the military, but he told me, he said, don't ever join anything you cannot unjoin. Now, I took that to heart, and I've never joined anything. I've also never voted.
Beautiful statement.
But so, and it kind of goes in with what Jesus warned. He said, swear not. An oath, if you take an oath, then basically it's evil. So, there's a big danger with these systems and the control they have in these systems. When people swear an oath, we'll talk a lot about the Illuminati and why the Illuminati broadcasts what they're going to do ahead of time, why they put it in movies, why they put it where they put it. And they have a code that they operate by, we'll call it a moral code, to tell you what they're going to do ahead of time. But my strong advice to anybody is not to be involved in any of this stuff. Just as my father said, I would avoid all oaths. And that's one of the main reasons why I've been a spectator more than anything else in this whole thing.
Say this, it's been an interesting conversation. I know we've gone over a lot of different stuff, but the reason why I bring this stuff up is because we call this Beyond Bitcoin not because of a hatred for Bitcoin or any of that. It's actually because we believe that Bitcoin started something that's going to echo into many different areas of our world and our existence. And that they're just like any technology, it is a double-edged sword. It can be used for the empowerment of humankind, or it can be used against humankind. And it really comes down to, in my eyes, us asking these questions and talking about and not being afraid to be considered a kook or crazy, to consider options and to talk about these things with people. Because when we're afraid to talk, just to even talk about these things with people, then the people who would use us and would try to subdue us will utilize that against us. They'll say, oh, it's unpopular. Like you hear the term conspiracy theorist. Well, what is a theory? It's something that has a lot of logical basis that just needs to be tested a little. Well, actually, it has been tested. The hypothesis is before it's tested. And whenever you can connect all these dots, it might not guarantee causation, but it might show high correlation. And it needs to be looked into and investigated further. And if that can be cut off, that before it ever gets to be investigated, because people are afraid to have the conversation in the first place, I think that's one of the big problems that we see today. And I think that's why we do what we do as a community and why we're reaching out. I don't think that the people here at BitShares think that that we have every answer. But we are asking those questions, and we're not afraid to ask those questions. And I invite every, cryptocurrency community to join up. And, this isn't just the BitShares show. The community has helped to pay for, the people who edit our Hangouts, we use a delegate that pays for the website where all that stuff is put up. It's basically, the community sees value in us having these conversations and being able to join in on the conversations. And to what I believe is that they want us to be having these conversations, and they want to be able to join in when they get the opportunity, or to simply sit back and listen if they are, on their way to work, because they can't participate in them.
That's a really good point. Just talking about what we were talking about, regardless of where you are in the rabbit hole, we know that there's a large number of these people that are essentially trapped in a system that they can't get out of. Maybe bankers jumping off of buildings. We don't really know. But who knows? I really don't know. I think, was it Jimmy Lee just recently? Big JP Morgan guy, another dead banker. Yeah. So, but I think the only real answer for us is people who are honest and above board and want to see a better system. Just move forward and invite them, all of whoever they are, that may be trapped in systems they can't get out of, to just come along with us as we want to move forward, not judging them or really doing an investigation to find out who is, because they know who they are and they're kind of trapped where they are. But if we can move forward, again, the analogy I use is like the Gutenberg press. There was a lot of reaction to it, but the bottom line was that people could read books now, and that books could sell, and that the information could spread. And the system just had to come along with it. It didn't really have a choice. It was just, as I have in one of my videos, it was an idea whose time has come. So hopefully, you guys moving forward with, freedom and accountability, transparency, and publicly available information, then maybe they're just going to come along, and maybe that's what they saw on the inside from the beginning when they kind of seeded this stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the transparent public ledgers and that the blockchain brings is going to be integral. I just hope that we have the inverse of what it is today, where there's complete opaqueness in the leadership ranks and complete transparency below, to the point where we regain the privacy and the ability to remain innocent until proven guilty, as opposed to these black sites that I'm seeing popping up in Chicago. My God, some of the stuff that's going on is just crazy to me. And I just really look forward to working with people like you guys, as always. And Brother John, you're always welcome to join us and talk about this stuff. And of course, feel free to invite other people here. And I'm going to just keep saying this. This isn't the Fuzzy Show. I set these up, but anybody can set these up, and I can join and be an audience member as well. So this is what the server is here for. This is why we have it set up this way, because guess what? This server can't necessarily be shut down because of quote-unquote copyright restrictions, because we're talking about things. Skype is not always the best way of doing things, because guess what? It's pretty much already, we know for a fact that everything that goes over Skype is stored. Everything that goes through Mumble isn't necessarily stored. So we have these things here as tools, and I urge everybody to recognize that it's valuable to use these tools, because we have to move forward. We have to work together. And that's, if there's any takeaway for me, it's that. And some of these tools that we have that are emerging are extremely powerful. And thank you to the BitShares community and Dan and all them for creating the decentralized exchange. I look forward to a day where that is the chief exchange, where all value is derived from, or at least exchanges like it. Because whenever you don't have this manipulation, I'm pretty sure that the people who are currently in power will be very afraid of a system like this, where they go, well, we can't naked short this. We actually have to risk real money. These things, I think, will end up helping us more than hurting us. We just have to make sure that the technology is used for the reasons we want it to be used for, right?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Brother John F., don't you think it was the Gutenberg press that led to the 100 years of religious wars between Protestants and the established religion? And those were some of the most,
King James Bible?
Those were the most, the Calvinists and whatever, and mainly in Germany, that got into the religious wars, and they were just the most ruthless massacres in history.
Well, there definitely were massacres on both sides. It was, it was basically a dying power structure. And we saw people who were raised up like the Calvinists. By the way, the Calvinists wholly misrepresent what was being taught. But, they kind of emulated the power structure they were fighting. It did lead to a big struggle, but ultimately, I think that what we saw was the Renaissance scientific revolution and kind of moving forward. I don't blame the people being able to read what the Bible actually says and what everybody else actually says in their scientific things. I think it was just a reaction of certain powers. Certainly, by no means would consider myself a Calvinist or even a Protestant. Just taking a wider, longer view, looking at that, I see that kind of as an analogy of where we're at now moving forward. That yes, there definitely are going to be reactions from all sides.
Yeah, that's the point I was trying to make. I didn't mean in particular Calvinists. I just meant the Protestant movement, where people were given the power to interpret the word themselves rather than have an established hierarchy do it, who had become very corrupt. And so I think the same thing is going to happen in the money sphere when people are given power over money themselves rather than having to deal with a very corrupt money power now. And my point is that those were the most ruthless wars in history, massacres by both sides. Yes, and it was because it becomes ideological and religious. It just drives men mad.
Well, there were a lot of very, very powerful people who were collecting a very large amount of money for being in charge, and they saw that was crumbling. So yes, that caused a lot of violence.
And my point is that could be what's going to recur now.
I hope not.
Well, I hope not too, but it's a possibility.
Well, there is another possibility since we're going into this. There's a gentleman, I'm wanting to say it's Mark Merrill, but I know his last name is Merrill. And he did an initial public offering of, I think it was like 100,000 shares in himself. At $100 a share. And then because of that, he had his own valuation of those shares. And as people believed the value of the things that he was doing in his life improved, of course, the valuation of those shares would go up. And I found it very interesting because this decentralized exchange allows us to create our own user-issued assets. If I create fuzzy shares tomorrow, and I run these, I distribute some of them freely, and then have a stage where people can pay for them, and then, they can join up to hangouts that I create or something to that effect. Well, now the things that I'm doing can actually be given a value by the public as opposed to some middleman who is going to manipulate it, right? Go ahead, Dan.
That already happens. That already happens today. That's what a family is all about. Parents, buy stock in their children, send them to school, educate them, and keep them on the right track. And ostensibly, in the future, they would return that to the parents. I mean, it's a very common element to family. Maybe more our nature to do that than to not do that. And to expand that worldwide on a much broader scale is not only a challenge, but it's an opportunity.
It's my understanding that that's going to be tested out on peer tracks. Musicians are going to sell shares in themselves, and we'll see if it works.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch everything. I'm actually considering doing something with our user-issued asset with Beyond Bitcoin one. Maybe a Beyond Bitcoin guild through BitShares Play, or something to that effect, because of maybe the legal issues might be a little bit different there. But we're sitting at about an hour and a half. You guys mind if we end the recording at this point in time, and we can always pick these conversations up further. And does that sound okay with everybody here?
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming, Brother John.